In today's session, we're going to talk about continuous insight. When you're interested in getting continuous insight in your DevOps environment, you should be able to actually get data from a real-time scenario. That means you should be able to access your database from an end-to-end perspective, looking at all the different discussion topics that take part in your DevOps process. And when you look at the data, you should be able to do it from at least two different angles. On the one hand, you should be able to look at it by discipline. So I should be able to look at it from, for example, a demand management perspective. So if I'm a demand manager, I should be able to look at the data and see things like my demand trend line. I would like to understand what is coming in and what type of discussion topics are coming into demand. So for example, user stories or requirements, depending on whether I'm working traditionally or I'm working with an agile methodology. I should be able to classify information. I should be able to list information. Things that are interesting from a demand management perspective, for example, is looking at in terms of value assessment and strategic alignment. Things like Cato analysis to understand, okay, should I be doing this requirement, yes or no? And what is also important is that you present the data in a format that people would like to see it so that they can build insight from the data itself. So for example, I'm not interested in Kano for those types of requirements that are still empty with analysis. So I'm going to eliminate empty. And then I see like about 60% is indifferent, then 14% is in reverse, must be, or inattractive. So that it's very toggling the data in order to be able to make sense out of what is presented. Another thing that you could do or should be able to do is present it in different ways. So I can just go into the configuration itself and say, instead of showing it as a pie chart, I would like to see it as a bar chart, and then save it as is, and then I could actually present it slightly differently. So this level of flexibility is important for an end user to be able to analyze the data, whatever you see in your dashboard, and present it in such a format that actually is presentable and actually gives you the level of insight that you need. And you could do that for demand management, for quality management, for development management, in fact, for any type of discipline. Another one that actually is good for showing things like service levels or service targets is, for example, in quality management, I could like to see the mean time to close, the percentage active with a defect. So I can set targets where, say, if it actually is below 24 days, then it's good. Is it below 72 days, then it's average, and actually everything beyond 72 days then actually becomes tricky, or it becomes challenging. Things like what's the maximum amount and what's the current amount of days. So those type of information are very valuable for you to show as well, or to identify. When you're looking at a topic itself, for example, I'm interested not from an end-to-end or discipline perspective, but I would like to look at it from the discussion topic in DevOps itself. For example, a release or a project or a sprint. I would like to see information specifically to a release. So I can either look at it in terms of the releases, the list of releases, or what is actually more valuable is look at it from a Kanban perspective, where you look at things like where are my releases in my life cycle. So in this case, we have a life cycle going from new to assign to in scope definition to in scheduling to in development in QA and then deployed. So you can instantly see where my releases are in their life cycle, and I can even also see, which you see here in dark gray, in which environment my release is. So in this case, demo release 2078 is in development. These two are in the QA environment, and there are none currently in production. So this gives you a good overview from a Kanban point of view where my releases are, and I could drag them from A to B if that would make sense in my business context. Now, let's actually take a particular release and take the role that I'm actually a project manager. Then I can go in my release, and what I would like to get is insight at the release level. So what you typically see in many of those workflow tools is that you have like an edit view, which gives you the details of a particular release, which is something that, of course, you need. But this gives you just some factual data about your release. But what I'm talking about is that it's very valuable to have like a summary detail view that gives you at just one point Of reference, information about my environment planning. So for example, I know that this release is planned to be in a development environment from this time till that time, in test from this time till that time, and so on. And I know how much remaining time is left for it to succeed, yes or no. You can also look at dependencies between your release. So in this particular release, we see there are 2 projects assigned and there are only 1 change request and 2 tasks assigned to it. And I can represent that in a list format or can represent that graphically. So for example, clicking here, so you can navigate, you could click here on the project and then you see the same for the project. So in this case, the project for implement business requirement 1 actually has these specific data. So you can set quality gates. You could do that at release level or project level. And you can then, you see that this project actually is linked to this release, of course. But also it actually has 1 sprint associated to it and 1 business requirement to it. From here, you can then click on the sprint, because this is actually an agile project. And then you see that this particular sprint actually has 3 user stories with associated story points and estimated effort and so on. So this way you can actually go and navigate from the release to the projects or any other object in the system. Let's go back to the release itself. So you're looking at the release. It's not only important to look at the dependencies between other types of projects and look at the status that they have, but if you go further down, then I would also like to design or create a release-specific dashboard that gives me valuable information about my release itself. So what we see here out of the box installation is that I see what's the time to due date for this particular release. So we know that this particular release has less than 5 days left. So that's why it gets into the red area, because we should actually be wrapping up this release. We can see the mean time to pick up this release was 5.5 hours, which actually is below the target that we have in mind for release managers to pick up this release and start designing and putting the scope definition. We know that, okay, we have 5 days left, and we see that the uncompleted work by type, we see that there are still 6 test cases to be completed. We see there is 1 change request that is not completed yet. We have 1 defect that is not completed. We have 2 change sets that is not completed, and there are 2 tasks that are not completed. So if you would like to see, okay, so which test cases are still open, I can click on those and I can look at the details of any of those if I want to. So that's a way to just drill down from the bar chart or the graphs itself. Other things that we would like to do with the dashboard is actually show some process-related statistics. So what's the time that the release was in scope definition? So here you see 0.03 hours. You can see that it actually was 0.34 hours in ready for development time. So one of the things that we highlight and that you should be able to highlight is what's the amount of time spent in value-added activities versus non-value-added activities. Every time a release or a discussion topic in general is in a non-value-added time state, we actually highlight them in red. So we try to minimize the amount of time in red and you try to maximize the amount of time in green. So in this case, you can see that we're okay when it comes to the amount of time ready in development, but since it was actually less than an hour in scope definition, we're actually not doing well. We actually should spend more time in development. But since this is a demo project or demo release, this kind of makes sense. So you can do that for any type of stage or status in the project, in the process for the project or the release. Gives you a lot of valuable information. Other sorts of information that you might be interested in from a release perspective is links to the other parts in the end-to-end DevOps chain. So for example, what are the remaining demand-related activities? So things like requirements, user stories, or change requests, which are still open. What are the remaining types of open development activities by type? So there are still 2 change sets that have not been closed and 1 defect that has still not been closed. And then from a QA perspective, for example, I might be interested in seeing, okay, there are still some test cases that are still open, but where are they in the life cycle? So I have 2 that are still in progress. There are 1 that is in review. There is 1 in ready for QA. There is 1 pending defect, and there is still 1 new one. So this gives you an insight knowing that you need to finish in, less than 5 days. You actually still need to look at that. So it gives you a lot of valuable information. It could be list information with status, and so on. So just give you an overview of what's technically possible with a continuous insight solution that we're presenting. So things like details on test cases, the defects that are associated with this release, the change sets that are associated with this release, and so on. One of the things that you're also interested in, if you're going more to the operation side of the DevOps environment, is looking at, okay, so what type of builds and releases or deployments have we done linked to this release? So you have here the finished jobs, and you see instantly that there is only one that actually had an issue. You can look at it from a graphical point of view. We have done 3 builds or deployments to the dev environment, and we have done 2 on the QA environment, of which 1 failed. So if I'm clicking on this one, most likely I will get this one that actually failed. So I'm going to click on this one and look at the details and see that this actually is indeed the case. You can also just navigate and look at the a particular job itself and see what was generated from out of this deployment, and then look at the details. So what you get here is that you can get that this particular report or job was actually rejected. You can click on the details and you get step by step what type of activities have happened. So you see that in this case, every deployment process actually can be split in a number of stages. And the particular stages that we are using for building and getting the information or the deployment ready is what we do in the pre phase. So here you're going to actually select the right job items. You're going to check them out of the baseline, and the baselines can come from a variety of revision repositories that are residing in, for example, in Subversion or in Git or in Perforce or in Dimensions or PVCS or CVS or Subversion. So we can just collect the information, do the builds, create a staging environment, and for all the changes that you find in the projects, I'm going to look what the nature is, and I'm going to actually just make the right proper builds. You see here instantly in one single go that what is successful and how much time it took to do it. And then you're going to see whether or not the run succeeded, and in this case it did not. So by looking at that, you know exactly what happened for this particular build. You can look at the full log as well, or look at the details, and then you see step by step what the activities were, what was done, what was the message, and you can look at the results as well. So let's actually scroll down here, and then you see here that this error when you try to run was failing. So let's look at the detail for the action, and then you see here Sonar is not running analysis. So in this particular instance, we actually were interfacing with the Sonar application in order to be able to do static quality testing, and this application was not running analysis, so that's why the run activity actually failed itself. So that gives you, without having to leave the environment, a very easy way to understand what was happening. So here, another one is like SQA analysis. I can click here on the details, and I can see from the system what type of data actually was coming back. So in this case, we see that there are actually no issues, and everything actually was correct, which is exactly what we were hoping for. So this is a type of information that you can get by just looking at the release and looking at the finished jobs, and you can look at build information as well as deployment information. When you're using with tasks, I can work with Burndown Charts as well, so I can look at yesterday's Burndown chart and the one from today. So you can see here we started with 3 tasks to be completed by the end of the day, and around 7:30 in the morning we completed 1, and there are still 2 to go before the end of the day. And you can see here when new tasks are being added, how and what type of effect it has on the system. So you can use this, but ultimately what I'm also interested in is trying to understand in my environment, okay, so where is my activity going to? So for example, I can just say, okay, let's see and replay what was created. Let me actually make that a little bit faster. What was created and what was done in what statuses. So things like new releases, new projects, new information, and how they actually are moving and who's doing that. So you can dynamically replay and see how this release is coming together, or what type of tickets are being created and associated with that release, and so on. Let me pause that one for a second and move on. Finally, in my dashboard, I'm actually looking at my, in this case, my release roadmap. So I'm actually showing that the release should or will be or is scheduled to be in development from this week onwards till that week. And we plan to be in the test environment from this week to that week, moving to pre-production from this week to that week, and in production starting from the week of December the 20th. So that gives you, in just a very simple dashboard view, a detail of all the relevant information that you will like to get for a specific topic. In this case, a release, but it could be any type of topic that you have in your DevOps environment. To just give you an example of that, let's just open up this particular project. And if you would scroll down the detailed view of the project, then you see at the bottom that you can do something very similar to a project which in this case, since it hasn't been started yet, it still remains empty. But I can create dashboards for projects itself. So that means, in summary, that I can create within our DevOps environment end-to-end continuous insight, either at a particular discussion topic level, so things like a sprint or a project or a release, or any other activity like a quality plan or whatever you want to like to design, as well as I can actually just create dashboards for particular disciplines. So things for development management, for quality management, for release or operations management, etc. I can actually design those. I can even extend that for the IT service management related activities like incident management, problem management, or change management. You just name it and you can actually model it. The importance is that you view it from an end-to-end perspective and that you're able to actually scale from there. You can actually change the format the way how you like, so that people get the insight the way they want it presented, and that you can just drill and zoom into from any type of aspect the way you want it to. This is what we believe is important for organizations in order to be able to get insight from an end-to-end perspective for your DevOps environment. Thank you.